Hey guys, we're going to talk about nature versus nurture, which is a huge debate still today in psychology. And we're going to see which one kind of plays out a little bit more in your life. Remember, nature is genetics. It is your DNA. It's in your DNA. While nurture is all of your environment, and that includes so many, many things. So let's talk about nature first. Okay. Um, when we are conceived, we are brought together by a sperm and an egg, and each of the sperm and the egg bring along 23 chromosomes each. So our DNA has a total of 46. And in the chromosomes lies, or in like, here's our nucleus, and then we have our chromosomes are the thread-like structures made largely of DNA molecules. And I'm sure you've seen this picture of DNA before. And the nucleotides, it's like the four-letter sequence that makes up all of everything. Really, the AP test is not going to go into that much biological depth when it comes to DNA and nucleotides and double helix and all that. But you do need to know that the humans are created with 46 chromosomes, 23 from each parent. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard of Charles Darwin. He came up with the idea of natural selection, that the genes that survive are the fittest genes, survival of the fittest. That if, let's say, what's a bad characteristic to have? A bad characteristic to have for humans is enjoying jumping off cliffs. That is not going to prolong our species all that long. If it is genetically, we are predisposed to just enjoy jumping off cliffs, and so survival of the fittest is like, okay, well, it doesn't make very much sense to jump off cliffs. So those people that do like to jump off cliffs will eventually get out of the gene pool as they plummet to their death and no longer surviving, and then not giving their characteristics to their offspring. And so the strong genes, the genes that say like, stay away from like dark, scary places, and don't eat the poisonous beans that are like growing on that plant over there. Don't eat that because that's poison. Those types of things. That's good. We like those genes. We want to keep those, and so those genes will survive on. So, example the fox story about how natural selection and evolution can kind of fast track, because evolution in humans takes years and years and years. Is an example of foxes. Foxes breed quite often, and you can have many, many, many generations alive at the same time, unlike humans. So there is an example. This was done a few years back, where they took 30 males and 100 females and they mated them, and they kept only, in the experiment, I mean, they didn't kill them, but in the experiment they only kept the tamest of the bunch, and then they mated them, and then eventually they just kept mating only the tamest of these foxes. And 40 years later, there's a whole new breed of fox that basically took the gene, which was tame, non-aggressive foxes. They took those and they created that as the thing that's going to survive. So they kept the gene that they wanted to keep, the tame gene, and they created a brand new breed of fox, a breed that could be domesticated, a breed that was basically very cat-like, and a lot less, animal that's not a domesticated animal. What am I trying to say? Those animals that you can't domesticate. Okay, so let's talk about nature in terms of like humans. So there's sexuality and there's gender differences, and it has a lot to do with our genes. It has not too much to do with how we're brought up, but genetics. So based on reports, and these are all true statements, casual sex is more accepted by men. Males are more likely than females to initiate sexual activity. Only 20, this is a strange number to me, only 25% of men believe that affection is a reason for first intercourse. And men more often than women attribute a woman's friendliness to sexual interest. Why do you think this is? Why do you think that men sex is more casual for men, and for women it's a little bit more heavy? It's a little bit more important for women. And I want you to think about evolution. I don't want you to think about like, well, in our society, blah blah blah. No, just for evolution alone. Because if you say like our society, that's not nature, that's nurture. So just for like genetics, why would that be the case? And it's simple. Sperm is cheap, eggs are not. Men make new sperm every second for their whole life. They never lose their fertility. Women, there's only so many eggs. When women are born, they're born with the most amount of eggs they will ever have. And then they lose one or two every month. And eventually they lose their fertility around the age of 40. They're not as, they're sliding into menopause. And so they only have so few and men have so many. So men can easily waste their sperm. It's not that big of a deal. Plus they're also spreading their seed and they're trying to increase likeliness of offspring. But women are not. Plus women have to physically be there for 40 weeks, for 9 months. Men, they can donate their sperm and they can be off to somewhere else. They don't have to stick around for the offspring. Women physically have to stick around because it's a part of them. And so it's sperm's cheap, eggs are not. When it comes to so the egg and sperm are fused and we have a baby. And there's a lot of studies with twins because it's so easy. Twins are kind of nature's science experiment where you can kind of tinker around and do the whole nature versus nurture debate without any ethical problems. So let's talk about the difference between identical and fraternal twins. Identical twins came from the same egg and same sperm. The egg and the sperm just divided and created two people. Fraternal twins are so identical twins are identical, like DNA, fingerprint-wise, they're identical. Fraternal twins, they're just as similar as any other brother, sister, or other, or siblings. Two different eggs, two different sperm. They're going to have the same birthday, but that's where their similarities end. They're just as similar as any other siblings. Identical twins are identical in DNA, so they're identical in nature. Fraternal twins have similar nature because they have similar DNA, same parents, same birthday, but they're not identical in terms of nature. Thankfully, through adoption and the internet, there have been cases of identical twins that were separated at birth, and through the miracle of finding each other online, found each other. And then we could really test to see, they have the same nature, same DNA, but because they were separated at birth and put in two different households, they have different nurtures. So we can kind of see which one has a stronger impact. Is it how they were raised, or is it their DNA? And before I knew this study, I would have said, it's how you're raised. You put me in a different household, I'm going to be a completely different person. Not necessarily. So there's these two twins, you see them right here. There's Jim Lewis and Jim Springer. It's just kind of coincidental that they're both their parents, their adoptive parents gave them the name Jim. That's just weird. But when they came together and they met each other years later, they basically were the same person. They had the same job. They drove the same truck. They lived in a similar sounding named town. They both had, they both did weird things like, okay, well it's common to live in like a, somethingville town, and it's common to be like a firefighter, and it's common to be whatever. But they both did unusual things, like they both used to write each other their wives' love letters, and they both flushed the toilet before using it. Just those are weird things. And then when they took they took IQ tests, once they found each other, they were tested on, and they came up with the same IQ. Even on questions they got wrong, they put the same wrong answer. And so, that's the same DNA, different environment, different parents that raised them, but very, very similar. So there's been lots of there's lots of similarities between identical twins and fraternal twins, just a lot more similarities between identical twins. Okay, so what about if you have a kid and you put them out for adoption? Are they going to be more like their adoptive parents who raised them? Or are they going to be more like their biological parents, the people that actually fuse the sperm and the egg together? Well, the very first thing that you're going to look at is temperament. Temperament is a person's characteristic emotional reactivity and intensity. So we've all probably heard of, or if you have siblings, younger siblings, they're such a good baby, they ate and they slept so well, or they're such a awful child. Well, temperament, there's a correlation between, not necessarily a causation. You can't, cause that, and you can't do an experiment on it to prove causation, but there's definitely a correlation between how kids, if they were good babies or if they were just like awful babies, and their outcome in life. Their drug use, their high school graduation rates. There is a not strong correlation, but there's a positive correlation between, the better of a baby, the better, adult life they're going to have. The worse the baby temperament, the worse they're going to have, higher chances of alcoholism and drug abuse and stuff like that. Okay. This term, heredibility, can be a confusing term. It is the proportion of variations among individuals that we can attribute to genes. So it's a percentage of differences between people that we can say that's because it's genetics. The higher the percentage, the more variation among genes and vice versa. So I don't know if you know too much about Mark Twain, but he was a satirical writer, and he suggested, he's satire, so everything he's suggesting is a joke. So take it as that. He said, we can solve this whole nature versus nurture thing. Let's take two boys, and let's put them in a barrel. From the day they were born, let's put one boy in one barrel and another boy in another barrel. And then when they're old enough, when they're, like 12 or something, we'll take them out and we'll test them. Because their environments are similar. They're two random kids, so their genetics are not the same. But there any differences between them, you can say it's genetics. Because think of it this way: if they were raised in a barrel, they had the exact same environment, they should have the same IQ scores. And if they don't, the differences between the IQ scores has to be genetics. It has to be, because they have the same environment. And that's what heredibility is any differences between people, the percentage of those differences that you can attribute to genes. So if you had two boys in a barrel and they took IQ tests, and one of them happened to be 100, which is normal, and one of them happened to be an 85, which is less than normal, that's a 15% difference, 15-point difference. You can say, because they had the same nurture and a completely different nature, 100% of any differences that they have, 100% of those 15 points you can attribute to genes. And so the higher the number, the more you can attribute to genetics. So here are some examples. Creativity, extroversion, autism. I mean, look at the autism number, 90 to 95%. 90 to 95% of the differences between people for autism you can attribute to genetics, which means there's some percent of autism that you can attribute to environment. 0% for religious beliefs. That means if someone is a conservative and someone is a liberal, 0% of their differences of religious beliefs. Wait, I just said religious beliefs. Well, same thing. I don't know why I said, sorry, it was just the election. It's still in my mind. Okay, so someone is an atheist and then someone is a Christian. 0% of their religious beliefs have anything to do with genetics. That's your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, and your manners have nothing to do with genetics. Those are the big three. Your manners, saying please and thank you, And whether you vote red, vote blue, or you believe in whatever God or not believe in whatever God you believe in, has nothing to do with genetics. No one is born a Christian. No one is born a Democrat. No one is born someone that says yes, ma'am, and no, sir. But then if you have identical twins, they have the same genetics. Any differences that they have is 0% heritable, because any differences that they have cannot be genetics because they have the same genetics. So any differences that they have, if one likes to read and one doesn't like to read, 100% of the likeliness of reading is based on, did I say 100%? 100% is based on nurture. So 0% heritability. Okay. Last thing about nature before I move on to nurture is, we can look at someone's genetics and look at on the molecular scale, and you can see the genes that relate to obesity, shyness, even reading ability. And why would we want to do this? You can predict risk so that steps can be taken, or you can prevent it from happening. And if you look at this person's genetic makeup right here, this is the 21st chromosome. Okay, so we have 23 altogether. The last one right here, X or Y, determines if you're a girl or a boy. Okay, but the 21st chromosome, so you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And this 23rd one right here is either an XX or an XY. This person right here, they have XY, so that means they're a boy. This is boys. Otherwise, it would be XX, and that would be a girl. But the 21st chromosome, notice how it's 3. Look, there's a pair for one from mom, one from dad, a pair for number 2, one from mom, one for dad. But from 21, the 21st chromosome, that's what Down syndrome is. If there's an extra one, everything should come in pairs. But if this one has 3, that is Down syndrome. So the AP test does ask that you know that the 21st chromosome, there's an extra pair there of the 21st chromosome, and that is what causes Down syndrome. Just that one little tiny thing. So let's talk about nurture, your environment. And here are the 6 environments that you have: parents, prenatal, experience in brain development, your peers, your culture, and your gender. All of these things are your environment. People assume that nurture means parents, but that is just one tiny part. Sigmund Freud, who's on the wall over there, he put a lot of emphasis on nurture means how your mother raised you. He even said if you have asthma, it's because your mother did not nurse you correctly. And we know that to be a complete lie now, but he put a lot of emphasis on the idea of how your mother overbearing, and all problems can relate to how your mother raised you. That is one tiny, tiny little part of what it means of your environment and nurture. Okay, so yes, parents are a big one. But what about your prenatal environment? That's your first environment. Even fraternal twins have different placentas. Yes, identical twins have the same one. So they're going to get the same environment. But fraternal twins, they're going to have 2 different blood supplies. If one has a more blood supply than the other, they might have better oxygen, which means right from the very beginning, the baby that doesn't have the good oxygen might have lower brain growth and mental deficits. And so the very first thing, women have to stay away from smoking and drinking and eating sushi and getting their nails done. And they can't eat soft cheeses, and they can't have caffeine, and they can't even get massages in the first 3 months of pregnancy or the last 3 months of pregnancy. They're not supposed to anyway. There's lots of things that the mother does that creates a environment for the child that is their very first environment that's going to affect so many things. Okay, so they're out of the womb. What kind of early childhood education are they going to have? Is it better to have them in preschool, or can you just sit them in front of the TV all day? I mean, if they're learning like one, twos, and threes on Sesame Street, is that any different than learning one, twos, and threes in a classroom? Yes, it is. Research found that stimulation of touch massage, so just touching and then being around other people, increases brain growth. So, you see this rat brain cell, this little elementary school version of the rat brain cell in a little tiny box by himself. Well, the same rat in a bigger box with other rats going to have more more synapses and more growth in their brain cells, and they're going to reach out and make those neural networks that they didn't have before. Same thing with actually just touching your child. Babies have died from not being held. It's very possible. You have to, hold the baby, rock the baby, touch the baby, and that increases not just blood flow, but brain development. And then we're in school, so our peers. Peers have a strong influence on a child. This is nothing new, but kids seek out peers with similar interests. And then those interests we talked about with group polarization become stronger. Whatever, if you join a club and that club is about, FFA. You join FFA, you're going to be more FFA'd by the end of the year than before. And so it's just whatever those interests become stronger when you're around other people that also have the same interests. But peers are important. You learn how to cooperate, which you need because we are social beings. We need to know how to cooperate in the work and school setting. Finding the road of popularity, which sounds like so superficial, but finding out what is popular is very important to fitting in. And fitting in people survive. If you don't fit in, if you're an outcast, that is not a good quality to have because you're not going to be able to procreate and you'll be an outcast in society and you'll be, I'm thinking about like caveman times where you'd be like left out to die alone. So it's nice. It's good to know what is socially acceptable, and not to stick out and be weird. Okay. And once again, with culture, we talked about before, remember, culture is the behaviors, ideals, and ideas shared by and traditions shared by a large group of people and transmitted from one generation to the next. Culture has changed a lot with the internet. There are memes that are self-replicating ideas, fashions, or innovations passed from one person to another. So memes can be like internet memes, and I have some here on the side. Of course, I need to update those memes because they are way old. But in terms of fashion determines culture and determines what's popular or not. And we just talked about all those things and how important they are. Okay, a lot of people don't understand why gender is a nurture thing. Why would gender be nature? Sex is nature. Whether you are female or male is based on your sex. But if your gender's in your head. Gender is not necessary. Sometimes you're lucky and your gender matches your sexuality and your sex, not sexuality. Like you are a woman who you are a female who believes she's a woman, or you are a male who believes to be a man. But sometimes those don't link up. Your gender. About these gender roles and stuff like that more in class, but your gender is in your head. So your sexuality is like, do you have a penis or a vagina? But your gender is, do you feel like a man or do you feel like a woman? It's more of a feeling than anything else. So that's the idea versus like transgendered, and that's different than transsexual. Transsexual is like people that have two different sex parts. Transgendered is more mental. Transsexual is, you've probably heard of like a hermaphrodite. People don't say that anymore. But transsexual is like you could have testes and ovaries, or you could have an underdeveloped penis that looks like it's a clitoris, and then you're raised as a female because of it, when really it was a penis. So there's a huge spectrum of sex, male, female, and everything in between, of gender, man, woman, everything in between, and then sexuality, hetero versus homo, and everything in between. How do you know which gender you are? There's two theories about gender and raising a child to be, gender neutral, or like, girls with pink and boys with trucks and blue and stuff like that. So the social learning theory is like kids learn what's appropriate for their gender based on what they're reinforced at home. If my son were to pick up a doll and be like, no, boys don't play with dolls. Here's a truck. Here's some Legos. And then he's going to be told, and he's going to learn in his head, oh, I don't play with this because I'm a boy and I will get scolded. And so I'm going to stay away from those things. And that's how they learn. Or the gender schema theory is more like they look at, as opposed to being taught that, they learn it by observation. So they understand, they look around and see what other kids are doing, and they kind of do that, as opposed to being told directly, girls do this and boys don't do this. They just kind of look and find it for themselves. Okay, so in the end, genes form us as individuals. I mean, think about the Jim Springer and Jim Lewis, the guys that were separated at birth, and then they were so similar to each other. But nurture has a lot to do with it. So we should not look at it as nurture versus nature, but nurture and nature collectively form us together. And we're a product of both of them. We can't, have one without the other. And it's impossible to think that you know everything because of how someone was raised or who their parents are. Because those are just one little aspect in everything. All right. Hopefully, if you have any questions, you can leave a note or a message on this video, or contact me in class, or hit me up on Remind or Google Classroom or whatever.